Hello there all my lovely jewelry makers, I'm Christina of CSLdesigns, and in today's tutorial I'm going to show you how to make this Triple Rose Wirework Ring, and you have plenty of options to customize it. For instance, you could easily play around with the sizes of the roses so they don't all have to be the same size, and also the colours of your wires, so you don't have to use the same colour wire for both the base wire and the weaving wire. That way it will really make the roses stand out from the ring band. Now if you end up making these rings or anything else from any of my tutorials, I would always love to see them. So if you would like, please feel free to tag me on socials. Links to all of mine are in the description box down below. And if you want to support me in any way so I can keep making these free tutorials for you, you can always like, share and subscribe. And there's also a super thanks button down below. Otherwise, if you want to learn how to make these cute triple rose rings, then keep watching. So these are the materials that we'll need. Now I'm using a regular round copper based wire, and in this case I'm using both a copper and a silver coloured. You can of course use just one colour if you prefer. Now the first gauge here is a 0.8mm, this will be our base wire, and that's what I've chosen as the copper wire in this case, which means that will be the colour of our roses. And then I have a 0.4mm for the weaving wire for the ring band, and this I've chosen to be silver. We then need a couple of tools as well, so I've got my flush cutters to be able to cut our wire, tweezer nose pliers to help manipulate the wire, and then finally, of course, a ring mandrel to help size and shape the ring. So the full material list will be in the description box down below. Otherwise, if you want to learn how to make this ring, then keep watching. We then need to cut some length of our wire, and what I have first of all is a length of a 0.8mm here, so the base wire of about 60 centimeters, and just make sure we have no kinks or bends in it. And then we have a length of the 0.4mm wire here, so the weaving wire of about 1.5 meters. So the first thing we need to do is grab our base wire here, because we need to shape the ring band first of all. So we're also going to bring in our ring mandrel, and then of course you just want to decide what size you want it to have, and just go up a little bit above that size. Now what I'm doing is placing the base wire here roughly in the middle of it onto the ring mandrel, and then what we need to do is I'm holding onto it with a finger, and we then need to start wrapping this around. So one full rotation with one side there, and then I'm just going to do the same with the other end. Now don't worry about it being perfect just yet. You need to go all the way around with the other side as well. So right now we have 2 wraps all the way around there, and I'm then going to bring it around one more time. So we end up with, as you can see, 3 wraps all the way around. And that's what we want for the ring band. Now what you just need to try and make sure to do is have the ends of the wire on either side be as even as possible. So we can just adjust it a bit. I can see that this side is a bit longer. So just kind of bring that around more where they overlap up here. And you can obviously always measure them. So one side is roughly 20 centimeters there. Just check the other side. And that is a little bit less. So I know I just need to do a bit more on this side, so bring that around more, and then we can just straighten this side back out, just so we have the 2 sides as even as possible, because once we get to using them for the roses, we don't want to run out of one of them before we end up using the other one. And then just trying again, got that down to pretty much 20 centimeters, and that one is more or less the same. So obviously it doesn't have to be precise down to the last millimeter, but roughly and as close to the same length as possible. Now what I'm going to do is try and kind of keep it around this size. Of course if I let go, you can see it wants to spring open. That's what wire would normally do. So you could always bring it down a little bit here, further down the ring mandrel, make it tighter as you tighten it around the ring mandrel, because when it then springs open, it will then spring open to a slightly bigger size. But we now have that in place, so we can remove it from the ring mandrel, and we still don't have to have it a complete precise size, because we can still make adjustments in a bit. Now what we need to start doing is weaving around the ring band. So that is this section here where we have the 3 wires sitting next to each other. So I'm just going to start from one end, and you can just kind of gently bend these out of the way a little bit to give you some more space to work with. And you want to take the end of your weaving wire here, place it basically through the ring band, and just leave that short little tail to hold on to, just like this. And then the weave I'm going to be doing is a diagonal wire weave. That's my personal favorite, so you could always choose a different wire weave using 3 base wires here. I have a full playlist with different wire weaves, so you can feel free to check that out. But what I'm going to be doing is bringing it around the bottom base wire first of all. So we attach it by just wrapping it around that single one, And I always like to just kind of make sure it's sitting right and it's nice and tight on there. And from there we need to go over the top of 2 base wires, so that's down between the top 2. Bring the wire all the way through, and then you can see that sits next to the previous wrap, but it's now going over 2 base wires. Then we want to come up between the 2 we just wrapped over the top of and back out to the front here and push that down nice and tight, and then go over the top of the remaining 2 and straight away come up between them. Gently bring that all the way through, and then again tighten that and help push down with the weaving wire that we just brought through, and then just wrap around the top one by itself. So just go straight down through the ring band, and then we have a single wrap around a single base wire again, just like we did in the beginning. Now what I like to do as well is just use my pliers to help kind of tighten these wraps nice and close together and straighten it out a bit. And that was 1 round of the weave. Now from here it's going to be a bit easier because the base wires are attached together now, so they're not going to be as springy. But to start the next round, I'm going to go over the top of just the bottom base wire. And also, if you've noticed, what I like to do for most of it is basically kind of put a bit of a curve into my wire and then feed it through like that, grab onto it and then pull the rest of it through. I find that tends to be the best way when you're working in a little area like this, instead of say go to the end of the wire every time, which you can do, and then feed that through. First of all, I find it a little bit more tedious, it takes longer, but also you are more prone to getting kinks in your wire. As you can already see there, my wire wants to curl up as I'm pulling it through, and if I'm not careful and undo it before I pull it all the way through, it'll create a kink and bend in the wire. Whereas doing it the other way, it tends to be easier to avoid that. So again, I put a bit of a curve into it, feed it through the point I need to bring it through, which in this case is between the bottom 2. So between the 2 we just wrapped over the top of, and as you can see I'm pulling that through with no kinks or anything. Bring it over the top of the top 2 and come straight through between the top 2 there, and again pulling it through gently of course, and I avoid kinks. So I find that that's the best way when you have a little area like this, like I said, to weave with, to make it the quickest and also the least likely for kinks and bends. But that is then round 2. So again, I'm just going to grab my pliers and just tighten them up. And then what you can see is that the weaving here basically covers the base wires, so that means that the ring band will end up being silver because I'm using the silver color for that weaving wire. And then we're left with the base wire, in this case that are copper, up at the top here that we're going to then use to make the roses with. So that's just obviously what I'm doing in this case. Like I said, you can easily use the same color wire for both. But this is just to show you what you could do to kind of make the roses stand out from the ring band. But then just keep going like this, working your way all the way around to the other side, as close as you can get the ends of the weaves there together. So now I'm a little bit further on and you can really start to see the effect that we're getting. But I also just want to mention that before you get too much further than this, you just want to bring the ring mandrel back and just kind of make sure to double check your sizing, because while we're weaving in all this in the beginning, it kind of changed a bit. So just bring it back, because this is the point where you can then just get it to the size you want, and then keep hold of the wire on the mandrel there. And I like to kind of put my thumb on the weaved part. And then you can just pull the base wires in case it's gotten a little bit too big. And then, like I said, before we get too much further where it gets harder to pull the base wire through the weave, while it's still a bit early on, just pull the base wire, tug on it to make sure it gets to the right size on your ring mandrel. So, other than that, just keep weaving. So now weaved all the way around here, you can see my ring band is complete, and I've gotten the 2 ends of the weave as close to each other as possible. Now they won't be able to meet up completely, but that's fine anyway, you don't have to worry about that. What you then just want to do is the very final wrap that you did where it was around a single base wire, just wrap around that a couple of times with the weaving wire before we then go in and cut it off. So you just want to do that on the back here. So cut it off so there's a tiny little end left that you can feel if you put your finger there. just make sure to push that down and kind of just roll it in the direction that the wrap is going in, so it gets tucked in between the base wires. And of course just get rid of the other end as well, the initial little tail that we left, just in the exact same way. So cut it off, and then just squeeze that down so we can't feel anything with our finger, because obviously this is going to be on our finger, so we don't want it to catch or scratch on anything and be uncomfortable to wear. So now we've gotten to the part where we need to make our roses using the remaining of our base wires here. So you should ideally have somewhat even lengths, one on either side, sticking out in opposite directions. But what we need to do is basically cross them in towards each other over the middle. You can see right there at the top. So literally start twisting them together like this. And what we're going to do first is make the rose is going to be in the middle. So we just twist them together like this, and that is basically going to be the very center of the rose. And once you have just a little twist going, I'm going to start just focusing on one at a time. So bring that around and then underneath the other one. So this is the new front one. And then you take the one that's now the back one, bring it further around and then underneath that new front one. And then that's the new front one. And then the back one, bring it around and underneath the front one to be the new front one. So you can see we're kind of constantly chasing each other with the wires here, and what it's doing is building up from the very center, that's kind of the center of the rose, and then outward, kind of a twist in the wires, but at the same time what then appears to look like the rose. So you just keep going like this basically until you have the rose in the middle here the size that you want it to have. So you can stop having it quite small. So at any point, obviously, when you like it, you just stop doing this, or you can make it bigger. You can also make the middle and the side ones different sizes. They don't have to be the same size. But you just keep going until you reach the size that you want this middle one to have. So I'm almost getting to the point. I think I'm just going to go around this side one more time. And then this is going to be my center rose. And then since we ended up with the wires on this side here, this is where we're going to make the next rose. Doesn't matter what side you start with. What I'm going to do is just twist the wires a little bit more, but just kind of have them stay in position. And then just grabbing my pliers, we need them to come a bit more out towards the side here and basically end up where the center of that next rose is going to be. So you can see they're now pointing towards the side. And then I'm just going to grab them with my pliers a little bit further down so we have some space between this rose and then the one we're going to make here on the side. Bearing in mind, we need to have enough space to actually make the rose, so they're going to sit next to each other. So what you need to focus on, where this bend we're going to do now is going to be the center of the rose. So just bend them upwards like that and away from the ring band. And then we basically need to do the same thing where we get back to twisting our wires. So we're going to start from what's going to be the center of this rose and then start twisting them together. And you do the same thing where you do one at a time and kind of they're chasing each other. So the back one you always bring underneath the front one, and then you take the new back one, bring it underneath the new front one, and have them just chase each other like that while the rose is growing and growing. And then of course just keep an eye on it and stop whenever you're happy with how it looks. So I'm just going to go a little bit further here. And also we want this side of this one to obviously meet up with the side of the first one we made, so the one that's going to be in the middle. So I am getting there, I can see. Moving away back towards the middle one. I think that's going to be my last round. And then from here it's a matter of kind of finding a way to get your wires to the other side of that middle rose there. So in this case, let's have a little look. I think this one wire I'm going to take and weave the end through to the other side here and underneath the kind of connection point between these two where we started out, just to kind of hide the transitions a bit more. So it's now coming out to the other side there and also making its way to the other side of the middle rose. I'm just going to bring the other one with us as well. So here what I'm going to do, I think, is actually wrap this around underneath the rose that we just made, just to kind of hide it and also in a way secure it a bit more in place. And again, it's up to you how you do this. It might be different from one to the other, where you kind of find the best paths. But what I'm going to do is bring it around the side here and underneath the roses we've made so far, but then out towards this side where we need to make the last rose. And then these two wires kind of meet up on that end. And what I'm going to do is just twist them in place, just like how we started out the other roses. So twist them, so we kind of fasten them, and we also can start the center of the third rose here. And then the same thing as before, we grab our pliers, grab onto the wires, we just twist it together, and then we just want to kind of get the same distance as we did on the other side. So again, account for what's going to be the center of the rose. So bring your wires straight upwards, away from the ring band like that. And then we already have the twist going. So I'm basically just going to continue with that. Start to bring the wires around each other, chasing each other to create that, first of all, center of the rose. And then as we keep going, have it build out further and further. Back one under the front one to become the new front one. And repeat the same thing until it's become the size that you want it to be and you like how it looks. So again, like I said, you can make them all different sizes. I think it looks nice where the middle one is the bigger one and then the ones on the side are kind of smaller, almost framing that middle one in place. Obviously, completely your choice. So just keep growing this, and I think I'm getting to the point where I'm happy with it, and it matches the one on the other side pretty nicely. Of course, they are supposed to be roses, so nothing is going to be 100% symmetrical or the same. They are supposed to be a bit different from each other, which obviously naturally they do become with all the twisted wire. But I think that's pretty much it done now, that final rose. So now it's really just a matter of finishing everything off. And again, it's just finding the best way to do that depending on what yours is like. So we can do the same thing as with the other side, kind of bring it underneath and in between some of the wires here. Wherever you have space to put your wires. So it comes out on the other side again there. Because obviously you do want to try and hide these underlying construction wires, you could call them, as much as possible, and just have it be about the roses as a focal point. Oh, this one here, I think we can just kind of bring down in between the roses out towards the other side, and then you just want to basically find a place to kind of tuck them away. So obviously we don't want the ends here sticking out to catch or scratch on anything. So if we just look below the roses here, so in between the roses and the ring band basically, you should have a little bit of gap here and there. So what I'm going to do is, this one looks like it can go kind of underneath that middle one towards the other side. And then what I'm going to do is cut it down, leaving a bit of a length here. And then using my pliers, I'm going to basically maneuver it, bend the end inwards first of all, because like I said, we don't want that sticking out in any way, and then basically tuck it in where there's a bit of a gap and kind of trap it in place just like that. And you can always just push it in further. And really the main thing is to, like I said, get rid of the end, but then also make sure that from the front here or the top, that it's not really standing out and you don't notice it. You really just see the roses. And then as for the one on the other side, the last little tail we have left, I'm going to cut that down as well, a little bit shorter. So I'm going to tuck that away on the side where it's coming from, but make sure I do it underneath this rose. So again, bend the very end of the wire inwards and then kind of tuck it away in between that rose and the ring band. And there we go. So now we can't see them or feel them. And then you have your Triple Rose Wirework Ring ready to wear. So it's a bit of a different take on just your typical Wirework Rose Ring, as we now have 3 roses going across your finger and also a weaved ring band. And like I mentioned, you can really play around with how these roses look, the different sizes, and also different colors of wires. So for instance, like I did in the tutorial, use a different colour base wire than the weaving wire to really make the roses stand out from the ring band. But of course it's just as lovely all in the same colour. Now if you like making jewellery, I have loads of tutorials on my channel within many different mediums, so feel free to check that out. You can also like, share and subscribe while you're there. Otherwise, I really hope you enjoyed this one. Thank you so much for watching it, and I'll see you in the next one.